Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, this show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. What's so funny, Tom? Do you want to share it with the classmate?
I feel like, because Adam's not here. That's like, the thing we're going to be starting here. Adam's not here. It's just us this episode, just the Tom and George hour.
Yeah, Adam,
but we left the pause.
Very sadly was slowly rolled over by a steamroller.
Yeah, very slowly. Yeah. Refused to get out of the way. Was wearing a fez and a crazy amount of blackface, which we all don't remember in that film, Austin Powers. Did you remember that?
He died doing what he loved, being problematic.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of, have you watched Austin Powers International Man of Mystery recently?
I have not of late. Does it hold up?
It's 80%, I'd say, holds up. That's amazing comedy,
and there's just some as you can get for the 90s.
No,
in all fairness.
Well, but also it's some dicey shit out of the 90s. I think any comedy that's older than a few years, you're lucky if you've got 80%.
That's what I mean.
Is not
80%
offensive.
Not offensive.
Yeah,
it's pretty good for 90s by current standards. If you look at Friends is streaming on Netflix right now.
God.
A lot of homophobic
and
stuff in Friends. They're just like,
holy
a
shit.
guy's touching me. That's crazy. And I'm like, okay, all right, calm down, guys.
Nothing ages faster than comedy, but Austin Powers, I was expecting to be oh man, of course, sex fiend comedy, it's going to be full of some awful shit. It's actually not that bad, I find, but I'd totally forgotten about Will Ferrell's character Mustafa, who's Will Ferrell, who's clearly really darkened his skin in a fez, and I'm like, oh man, I had forgotten about this. Holy shit, that's
right.
terrible.
And he goes, I broke my leg. That's the character.
He's the guy who screams a lot. But then he's also, I think, is he the guy run over by the steamroller? Or is that just some dude?
Just a random dude.
Maybe I'm combining two moments. But the Will Ferrell bit, oh my God. Anyway, Adam's not here. He was actually able to somehow leave the state and visit family. So, lucky bastard.
And as we all know, Tasmania doesn't have internet, so there's no possible way that he could have contributed to the show. Yeah.
That's true. I think actually this isn't a joke. It does have to come through just one giant cable that comes from the mainland to Tassie, and if that cable gets clipped, it's fucked. I think that happened once. I think we talked about that maybe 7 years ago. But he was able to leave the state to visit family, which is great. Good for him, because I'm not going to be able to do that for a while.
Why would you want to visit his family, Tom? That's so weird.
Visit his family? That's true. Hey, I like to pay Kathy a visit.
Kathy's a lovely
sometimes.
Lady. She's always been lovely.
She's she's great. I
don't know what Adam's talking about all the time. I'm joking. Kathy, I'm joking, obviously.
Yeah. No. But no, because, big sort of news going on around in Australia at the moment, as we are a newsy type stuff and things podcast. I suppose we should not just talk about past instances of borderline racism in 90s comedies. We should talk about the news.
Our close friend's mother on a first name basis is definitely the kind of content that our international listeners need to hear.
That's very true. Very, very true. A sort of big story in Australia at the moment is that the COVID-19 outbreak is currently going on in Sydney, in New South Wales at the moment.
But Tom, the good news is we nailed the vaccine rollout, so it's not an issue.
Oh, we nailed it so hard. 8% vaccinated, George.
80%.
8%.
Wait.
No. 8.
80. 80.
No. You know how the number 80?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know how there's two digits in 80?
Yes, 80.
There's an 8 and there's a 0?
Yeah, 4/5 of the total being 80%.
So, So, but rather, let me put it this way. When you think of the number 80, think of it less like a singular number in its sense, and think of it more like an equation. So say you spread out that 8 and that 0, and you add a big old fuck off plus sign in the middle.
Okay.
And then you solve that equation, and then that's the percentage that we've got vaccinated. So you got a big 8, then you add 0,
decimal point,
and that's the percentage we've had vaccinated.
We've only vaccinated 8%.
I know.
That's a travesty.
It's a gigantic clusterfuck, and so that's happening in New South Wales at the moment. I believe the case numbers are rising quite scarily.
Which is okay. So this is what happens when you have a lockdown, not lockdown, which is what New South Wales has opted for. Where Gladys Berejiklian, like like so many Voldemorts.
We need to refer to her by her dictator name, as we had Dictator Dan down here in Melbourne, Victoria.
Sure.
So she is henceforth to be referred to as Gladimier Putin. Twitter has spoken.
Yeah, I think that's where we landed. Yeah. So Gladimier has announced an official lockdown, a lockdown, as opposed to a restrictions lockdown, which is what they had before, which was like, it's not a lockdown.
Lockdown's what Labor does.
But
only Labor does lockdowns.
No, Labor does lockdowns. We don't do lockdowns. First in line. And we absolutely nailed it. And you can tell that because case numbers, even in the midst of this lockdown, not lockdown, have actually been increasing in the last couple of days as opposed to decreasing. Yeah. So it was getting down to sort of like 30 cases a day sort of thing. And then it's sort of shot up and increased pretty substantially from there. So...
Yeah,
but
I think Gladimier,
like there was lots of like content circulating around in the Australian media of like, what is essential, what's not essential. Like, and I was like, I feel like I'm having Vietnam fucking flashbacks to like this time a year and a half ago. Like it's like 18 months and we're still making like Louis Vuitton is an essential service joke. Like, why? How is this still the fucking reality that we live in? It's still the same. It's the same dumb joke. We don't even need to do a show today. We just copy and paste old content from a year and a half ago, going like,
you just get the same episode. And whenever we say Dan Andrews, just this really obvious dub goes, Gladys Berejiklian. It's the same thing.
Oh my God. We just do that? Quite literally the same content. I feel like I'm in hell. Is this what hell is? Is this just the same thing over and over again? Yeah, it's the same. It'll be like Louis Vuitton wasn't open on the east side of Sydney, which is where all the rich white people live. But in the southwest side of Sydney, there's fucking jackbooted thugs going in there and policing brown people within an inch of their lives. Surely that couldn't be for any nefarious racial reason. And we're like, how are we doing this? How are we still having this same cunting conversation that we had a year ago when Victoria was like policing the inner city towers and not the rest of the white, rich suburban suburbs that are like right next door? It's like, it's the exact same story. It was just like maddening.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's shown me how many people, like, people I follow on Twitter or whatever, like Australian personalities, I now know whether or not they live in Sydney. Just sort of based on what they've been saying. Like, I haven't needed to know. Been like, oh yeah, like I like that journalist or that comedian or whatever. And then they're all just referring to that sort of shit of like, how the hell is EB Games open or something? Someone tweets and it's like, oh, you must live in Sydney. Okay, cool. So it's a bit chaotic. Even to the point where Gladys Berejiklian, the Premier, I think said today that essentially preempted that tomorrow's case numbers will be bad. Like she straight up said something along the lines of like, prepare yourselves for hearing that there might be 100 plus cases tomorrow. So, wow, like that's, Miss Gold Standard COVID-19 response there.
Gold standard COVID response. As Scott Morrison said, New South Wales, Gladimier Putin was the absolute fucking gold standard in terms of pandemic responses. And we could see that from the absolute fucking display over the last couple of weeks. It's like, I saw pictures doing like comparisons between like Melbourne's lockdown last year, the sort of second lockdown, which was the hard sort of 100-day plus.
Yeah,
stage
like 100
4,
day plus, like
butt fucking lockdown.
Through late October.
So showing pictures of like empty streets, and then it goes Sydney's lockdowns, like people hanging out in pubs, like going for walks down Bondi, like having a laugh, like having a couple of beers, like all very essential stuff. I was like, no shit, like of course you're gonna get more cases if you've got this sort of mixing. Like this is what it is. Like this virus, the Delta variant that we've got here in Australia, is so much worse than what we were dealing with last year, Melbourne's second lockdown. Like, it's just...
all the parameters that they've been all the parameters that they've been working with kind of to consider whether or not someone's been exposed, whether it's an exposure site or like tier 1 through 3 or whatever, is just thrown out the window with the Delta variant, from what I understand, because previously, actually, it was a solid burn, I think, from an epidemiologist. I can't remember who it was, but they said something along the lines of that this new variant further renders the COVID-safe app developed by the government useless.
Completely
because
useless,
that app only pings people who've been in proximity of each other for a continuous 15 minutes plus. Yeah. But this is like more like 15 seconds.
Oh, if they call it
in the wrong way.
Fleeting contact, where it's like you've
fleeting,
literally just
you
like
could pass each other.
Is literally like what I had in my mind as the worst case scenario for a pandemic when the pandemic started. Like when you cross someone walking in the street and you'd like hold your breath because you're so anxious about the pandemic. That is literally what it is now. Like it is literally that fleeting. It's like people in a mall or a like shopping center have just like walked past one another. They've captured on CCTV. This is the only time when these two people interacted, and it was like bang, that was it. It was just them walking past each other and like one walking through the breath of the other. Like that is how infectious this fucking disease is. So like,
so George, would you say that it is time that our listeners crack each other's skulls open and feast on the goo inside?
Yes, I would, Kent. You don't want to be too alarmist, but also it doesn't feel like anyone's being really alarmist enough as far as I'm concerned. It's just like we could do with a little more hectic alarmism, I think. Like it really does. It lays bare the faults, not just in the Australian federal government's response to all of this, but also like the psychological flaws that we have. The fact that we like, it's either feast or famine with this virus. It's either we're terrified, we're all going to die, this is horrendous, let's get all the toilet paper off the shelves, panic, or it's total complacency. And we just seem to be oscillating back and forth between the two, being like, oh, there haven't been any cases here in 45 minutes. I'm just going to go to a crowded cinema with 500 people and, not have masks on and all that. Like, we're just like so quick within the space of like a couple of weeks, they're just back to being incredibly fucking complacent. And it's like, this virus will not wait for you. It will not like sit nicely by the door just because you're James Packer and you've got a casino license. Like it will get into everywhere and go everywhere. It's not gonna and we just can't be complacent. We all need to get vaccinated. That's the only way that any of this is going to get better, because in an instant, in a snap, like within a day, 2 days, 5 days, we can find ourselves back in the same fucking situation all over again. Like nothing has changed from this time last year. Nothing at all. Like,
oh yeah, and particularly it really goes to show how important the vaccine rollout is, right? Because I remember Christmas. Like just 7 months ago, that we had our turbo lockdown. We got sort of closer to Christmas. There was a bit of a scare in Sydney, and I was in Canberra at the time.
Beaches? Was
that
one?
Yeah, that's when the Northern Beaches thing sort of happened, and they nipped that in the bud pretty good. But I remember feeling around then, you're like, we've gone through the super hard yards. We're rolling out the vaccine. Who'd have thought we'd be back in talking about these very same things now, because of how quickly this sort of thing can spread. Because while this is all happening in New South Wales and we're down here in Victoria and all the people in WA and all that sort of stuff, the speed at which people move around, that's why this happening in Sydney, my point is that this shouldn't be considered as, it's a New South Wales problem, you guys fucked up. It's like it's a country problem, because this can just spread around. It affects us all. I think people have died, so it's like really fucking serious.
Things will never, I know people desperately want things to go back to normal. Here's how you do that. You go and get your vaccine. That's the only way that this is going to go back to normal, because we can lock down, we can tamp things, we can get it under control. We know we can do that, which is something earlier in the pandemic, I didn't realize we could do. I was very skeptical when we entered our second lockdown, which was 100 plus days. And they're saying, the way we're going to come out of this is if we have fewer than 5 cases a day and no mystery cases and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I remember saying at the time, like, it's impossible. It's just never going to happen. It's too infectious. And we managed to do it. We somehow, after 100 plus days, when there was like 800 cases a day at one point, we managed to get it down to nothing. And I was like, great. Well, a couple months later than that, the vaccine was announced, like, it's all going to be over. 2021, it's all going to be done. And I said to my wife, I was like, this is so great. 2021, it's going to be our year. 2020 was so shit. We're going to have the vaccine rolled out. It's going to be great. And she was more circumspect even than I was. And I consider myself to be like quite sanguine about these sort of things. She says, let's see about the vaccine rollout. Well, like, I think it's going to be more complicated than you think. I'm like, no. By April, the Australian government's just got to get out there and get everyone a jab. Got to give a go to get a go and get a jab.
It's amazing. It's like Grace was the George and you were the Adam.
Grace was the George, 100%. I was just very optimistic for whatever reason, because I was like, it is. I think I very shallowly assumed that even in the face of such overwhelming evidence, like such overwhelming desire to get the country back to normal, that the federal government, even this federal government, as inept as they are, would focus all of their efforts to making sure it got done and got done well. Because they want the country
they have such a raging hard-on for the economy and for money to turn over and things that, hey, you know what would do that if things were back to normal? So
I selfishly thought that, blatant self-interest and money would be enough to instill competence in this federal government, but sadly, no.
Nope.
Even money is not a salient enough motivator to get these fucking pricks to actually be good at their jobs and get the vaccine rollout going. So it's woeful.
No chance. And then you look at what New York was like this time last year and look at them now and they're laughing. Anyway.
It's so weird seeing episodes of the Colbert Show, Late Night with Stephen Colbert, where they've got like a full studio audience and a band. And like, I'm like, it's like looking into a parallel universe or something like that. It's like, I know we've got venues at some capacity and things like that here, but like, I don't know, something about seeing people in a theater unmasked, like just living life like things are normal again. It was just like kind of, I don't know, kind of boggled my mind a little bit.
It was just the announcement, I think, that the mayor of New York or something was saying that all COVID restrictions were going to be lifted sometime soon. Like,
that's nuts.
Like, not COVID normal. Just
normal.
Who gives a shit about hand hygiene? Fucking lick each other's eyeballs normal.
Yeah, it's
like just go crazy. Orgies in the street normal. Yeah, just absolute bonkers. But yeah, New York with like mass graves a year ago, and like the insanity that was going on in the States.
Yeah, can't be overstated.
Now, while Australia has had it nowhere near as bad as the States did, we're still where we were a year ago.
It's kind of we've really sort of, to a certain extent, I think we've been victims of our own success because we were so good at locking down and getting the virus under control. It means that negotiating for vaccines and getting vaccines and rolling them out hasn't been as much of a priority because as the federal government never ceased to remind us during the early days of the rollout, it's not a race. It's not a competition. We've got time.
It's not a race.
The risk portfolios, it's on our side.
So much time.
And because we haven't got lots of cases and lots of deaths, it's been hard for us to like requisition more. It's hard to justify getting more vaccine into the country than we'd already ordered because like, why would we prioritize Australia, which is doing fine, as opposed to other countries that have got thousands of deaths a day? It's like we've
and that'd be where the complacency comes in as well, right? Because I guess we as a populace haven't been seeing it like people in America, the UK, India, all those countries have. They haven't been seeing people they know and love dying by the thousands. Yeah, so
it's it really reminds me of there's a line in one of the Marvel movies. I think it was the Winter Soldier, the Captain America and the Winter Soldier, something like that.
Okay. All right. I'm interested to see what this is. That was a left field reference.
I just watched it again recently where they're talking, someone's talking to Steve Rogers about what it's like, being awake again in the modern world. And one of the lines, he says something like, not having any polio, that's great. Like, it's just kind of like a throwaway line. But it made me think, like, that's what, like, we haven't, for those people who lived through polio, the vaccine created by Jonas Salk was like a life-changing revolution that everyone absolutely wanted to get because they'd lived through the horrors of polio and people they knew had died and been permanently disabled by polio. And so when an opportunity to get a vaccine was available, people went in droves. And for generations thereafter, people were like, no, you got to get a vaccine. Like, you can't live through the horror that we lived through then. And I think to a certain extent, we've just like had it too good. Like, we just haven't had like the level of death and disorder that would otherwise give people the impetus to go and get the vaccine. Does that make sense?
No, I get what you mean. But also I'd say, like, it's not that we've had it too good. I mean, it's good that that's happened. Like, I wouldn't have it the other way
of course.
to get the vaccine to roll out. Like, I wouldn't be like, no, you know what? We should have just, like, bump off a couple of 100,000 people to the Rona, and I think we would have sorted this out.
Just a Thanos click and evaporate a couple 100,000 people to prove a point. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, let's not do that.
It is very clear to me that because we haven't suffered the worst that this pandemic has had to offer, it means that we're not really rushing to the doors to find a solution.
No.
Which means that it's just going to all go on longer. So we're talking today, one of our stories is talking about how the Australian government announced that there would be more Pfizer coming sooner because of some deal that they'd arranged with Pfizer. And basically Pfizer immediately came out and said, that's not what we said.
It was an announcement. And we know that Scott Morrison, he loves an announcement.
He loves an announcement.
Loves a bloody announcement in his Australia flag mask. Rat.
I
hate this guy.
Flag,
I hate him so much.
Legitimately such a douchebag, honestly.
Yeah. It's just, he makes me sick.
So to be clear, contrary to what the government said, that these are not new or extra doses of Pfizer that we're getting on top of what we've already ordered. These are what we already ordered. They're just being delivered slightly sooner, further along.
Maybe slightly sooner. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but it's just it's comforting to see your leader announce something like that, only for all the other interested parties involved to say, we got to put out a public statement to say that was all complete bullshit. It is like, I know people often like say that Scott Morrison is kind of like, he's as close to Trump as Australia's ever gotten. This felt extreme. I thought like it felt like a really Trump kind of news story.
I don't know.
He announces thing, everyone says, "Whoa, that thing is not correct." Like straight away.
Counterpoint: Tony Abbott.
I mean, yeah. Like, Tony Abbott, it was a walking gaff machine. I don't know.
I feel like he pretty consistently said things that were like provably untrue.
Oh, provably untrue, sure. But I guess just like I don't remember him ever like saying a lot of things and then like the interested party involved being like, no, we are not with him. Like I don't remember him doing a lot like I just remember him eating onions and like talking about
just being a fucking moron. So a statement from Pfizer says, quote, the total number of 40 million doses we are contracted to deliver to Australia over 2021 has not changed. We continue to work closely with the government to support the ramp up of their rollout program, the statement said. While the details of our agreement with the government are confidential, we can confirm that deliveries to Australia remain on track.
Cool. So, yep, more Pfizer's coming.
The same amount of Pfizer is coming sooner.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and they're confirming that after July 19, that we should be expecting about 1 million doses a week, which is definitely more than what it has been previously.
Yes.
Yes.
Which, after all the bullshit of whether or not anyone under 60 can have the other alternative in Australia, AstraZeneca, I guess it's good that those doses of Pfizer might be arriving sooner rather than later, because then that'll hopefully clear it all up.
Apparently, there's also a longer window between the two shots with AstraZeneca compared to Pfizer. So
yeah, I thought it's like between 8 to 12 weeks, and the longer you leave it, the better.
With AstraZeneca, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, with AstraZeneca. Yeah. Sorry, did I say Pfizer?
No. I'm just saying.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Phew.
So whereas Pfizer is shorter between the two shots, so. There was a guy on Q&A the week before saying like, oh, should I just like go and get my AstraZeneca, and they basically said, like, if you are getting the Pfizer, it'll be a shorter window, so you'll most likely be fully vaccinated sooner if you wait for the Pfizer rather than. I was just like, can we just have clear, just tell people to go and do a thing?
Yeah.
Like, why?
Oh, it's nuts.
It's
why, but even their efforts to tell them to go and do a thing. Did you see the new ad that they dropped?
Was this the woman gasping for breath?
Yeah. This ad, what are we, 18 months in, and there's like authorized by the Commonwealth government camera kind of ad about coronavirus. Who'd have thought? Turns out
this coronavirus situation pretty bad, you guys.
Pretty bad.
Not a fan.
It's confronting. Like it's of a woman like struggling to breathe on a ventilator and all that sort of stuff. And saying like, we've got to get tested, get vaccinated, blah blah blah. But a lot of people were quick to point out, being like, yeah, but like the woman you have in the ad who's suffering from the breathing troubles and all that. Probably isn't eligible to get the fucking vaccine. No. Like, she's smack bang in the age group that's confused as fuck right now as to what they're allowed to do. So it's like, God damn it. Like, how many more ways can you fuck the messaging on this?
Be alert, but not alarmed. Be alarmed,
but also be alarmed.
Don't be
alert. And maybe not alert, but a little bit alert, and Freak also out. A lot alarmed, but don't be alert. Yeah, panic.
Yeah.
Just panic.
So, I mean, should we show the video? I don't think we need to. It's just a woman in a hospital. She's attached to a respirator, gasping for air. It's obviously meant to be quite graphic.
It's very much a visual thing.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that their big like PSA to get vaccinated features a person who probably couldn't get vaccinated
who would be ineligible.
Wonderful, fucking wonderful,
nailing it. So there was also nailing it. A story that broke today that it wasn't even necessarily the Australian government who was responsible. Well, not this Australian government, who might have been responsible for getting those Pfizer doses pulled forward. As number one story in the ABC as of this afternoon from the 7:30 report says that senior business figures turned to former PM Kevin Rudd to intervene in bringing forward Australia's Pfizer vaccine supply. So Kevin Rudd,
odd
from beyond the grave. Still influencing policy. So this came. What is it? Health department officials have flatly denied many of these reports, but the businessmen in the US who had connections with Pfizer were hearing even more graphic accounts of how badly offended the company had been by the response to its early approaches to Australia last year when it offered to access what is now to be a crucial part of our vaccine coverage. And senior Australian businessman whose identity is known to the ABC but wishes to remain anonymous held 2 meetings with senior Pfizer executives in late June, only to be rebuffed. And they suggest that in the absence of Mr. Morrison, former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, it was known to them because of his work in the United States as head of the New York-based Asia Society, may have had some influence. So there's a record of a Zoom meeting set up between Mr. Rudd and various, important people and text messages, and it goes into some detail. But it's like,
fuck, if that's true, that would really get up ScoMo's goat, I reckon.
It's
just to be like, what do you mean Rudd secured this?
Hang on, I can actually read from you the letter that Kevin Rudd sent to ScoMo. 30th of June 2021. Dear Prime Minister Morrison, as I mentioned to you earlier today, it's like, as per my previous thanks for your time on the phone today.
Yeah.
As per our discussion, just so I've got it in writing, you fucking said this. I'd scheduled a call with Albert Bourla, Chairman and Chief Executive of Pfizer Incorporated. I used the opportunity to congratulate Pfizer on their outstanding research and development and their success in producing so early a world-class COVID-19 vaccine. We also discussed Pfizer's current challenges and the political pressures they face around the world for an intellectual property waiver to expedite the supply of vaccines to developing countries. We follow these debates closely through our think tank operations in Washington and Pfizer's ongoing negotiations with the United States Trade Representative. Here's the juicy part. I also used the call as an opportunity to ask Dr. Buller whether there was any possible way, given Pfizer's current international contractual obligations, to advance the dispatch of significant quantities of the Pfizer vaccine to Australia as early as possible in the third quarter of the year. My understanding was that there were current contractual arrangements with the Australian government to deliver a total of 40 million doses by the end of 2021. I did so not as a representative of the Australian government, but purely in my private capacity as an Australian citizen who cares for his country's well-being. They indicated they had limited flexibility, blah, blah, blah. Nonetheless, he also indicated the number of their manufacturing facilities were producing ahead of schedule. In response to my representations, Dr. Buller said he would personally look at, quote, what further might be able to be done. I thank Dr. Buller for that. So it literally seems like all we needed to do was ask Pfizer nicely if they would give us some more vaccine earlier, please. And Kevin Rudd did that, and it seems like they're doing that. So, I mean, clearly, I don't know. I don't know who else would have leaked this except for Kevin Rudd, right?
Oh, right.
Like, who the fuck else has access to this information?
Where did the story, I wonder where the leak came for the story that makes Kevin Rudd look like the good guy. Gee, and he's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, I just found this piece of paper here. It says fucking Kevin Rudd's an excellent guy. I just thought you guys might want to hang on to this. Yeah, so, I mean, in lieu of having a functional prime minister, I'd take a Kevin Rudd. I'd take a former prime minister in lieu of a functional current prime minister. Is that really all that needed to be done? We just need to ask him nice.
Just to ask him nicely.
It's like when they talk about we're going to get the national cabinet together and we're going to put together a plan and all this sort of shit. I'm like, cunts, it's been 18 months. What the fuck have you been doing? What have you been doing this whole time? What have you been doing?
What have you been doing?
What have you been doing?
It's
been a year and a half.
Yeah, surely you've you jerked yourselves off enough after a month or two, like the rest of us.
We haven't jerked off enough. We haven't jerked off enough, and don't call me Shirley.
They had so long to get this right. So long to come up with a plan.
I'm just like, I can't, my brain cannot process. Surely, I would assume that our government representatives would be in touch with Pfizer, all the time.
Well, no, because they love the fact that we can locally manufacture AstraZeneca, and just that's sick, Australian made, George.
I mean, that's great, except that nobody wants it because the government made them scared of it.
Yeah, no one wants it because they keep telling us not to get it.
I just don't. It honestly feels like they're asleep at the wheel. It just feels like, it's like a Looney Tunes cartoon. And they're running out over the cliff, and the only reason they haven't fallen down is because they just haven't looked down at their feet. That's what it feels like in the Australian government. It's just and they just haven't looked down and going, oh, that's when they fall.
I don't know. The vibe I get is that it just really feels like they are, that they are bothered by the fact that they have to deal with this, and they're not very good at hiding it. Oh. It's the kind of it's the same with how they view poor people as well. Yes. It's just oh god, you people again.
Oh, what, starving to death? Oh, classic poor person. Should have been rich.
Emperor's New Groove, was it Yzma just being I'm sorry, it's not my responsibility you don't have, what was it again? Food? You should have thought of that before you became peasants. Just open disdain for the fact that they have to deal with this situation.
Brad Hazard today, I believe the health minister in New South Wales, when questioned about the fact that 100 private schoolboys had been vaccinated with the Pfizer against regulations.
God, yes, we need to bring that up.
Said something to the effect of it was a couple of 100 doses in a rollout of millions, well, get over it, sort of thing.
Fucking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Have a cup of concrete.
Have a cup of concrete and hand the fuck up, mate. It's just this unreal kind of there was this, I forget who said it. There was this quote, but I was just it was the perfect, rebuff to psychotic conservatism that you see that just doesn't seem to give a shit if people live or die. But the quote was something to the effect of I don't know how to explain to you that you should just care about people. That's all. I don't know how to explain to these people that other people's who are not their voters, their lives also matter. Like,
yeah,
it's the craziest
those
thing.
people matter. If you just do things that like kill people who aren't your voters, that reflects poorly on you at minimum. Really, you should care because they're people. But if at minimum you care whether or not you look good, then that should be it. Was it Simon Birmingham recently as well? Just essentially said I think we talked about this last week, didn't we? Of saying that when asked about what about all the corruption, they're like, well, the public knew about all the corruption and then they voted us in, so that makes it not corruption. If the president does it, then it's not illegal.
Yes, yeah.
Kind of thing.
That's the most circular fucking spurious logic I've ever heard in my life. Like, they voted us in after the corruption, so obviously it wasn't corrupt.
Yeah. I was like, Simon, you said the quiet part loud, mate.
Said the quiet part loud and the loud part quiet. What's that line in The Simpsons where he goes, Dad, that's specious reasoning.
Thank you, honey.
There's a rock. No, he goes, there's a rock, and it keeps the tigers away. And he goes, Lisa, I would like to buy your rock. And she goes, no, Dad, that's specious reasoning. And he goes, like, do you want $50 for it? And she goes, she just sighs and takes the money. Like,
so
I will give you money for this rock. Like, that is literally the level of analysis that this federal government has gone to.
Funny story, that scene is what taught me the word specious.
Yes.
The Simpsons taught me a lot.
So
I think it shows.
Maybe Kevin Rudd is the deep state. I think that's what we learned. Secretly running the government from behind the scenes.
Well, and yeah, sure. And if the deep state's getting us more vaccine, then give me some of that deep state.
I love that deep state.
Hook some of that deep state right to my node.
Oh.
So I haven't made you squirm enough this episode, George.
You haven't used everyone's favorite phrase.
Yeah, everyone's favorite phrase. Don't worry, it's coming.
Okay. So, do we have anything else on the vaccine rollout? It's going swimmingly. Obviously, everything is
I mean, the whole thing.
So I don't know what.
Oh, we've nailed it so hard. I guess we didn't really talk in detail about the private school boys who were just all vaccinated thanks to a fuck up, apparently.
Whoops.
Whoopsies. Yeah, whoopsies. We vaccinated 160 something 18-year-old year 12 students. Because reasons? I know from my understanding was that the initial issue was that they were boarders at the school. So like it was like a boarding school kind of thing. And because there's like priority access for vaccines from people from like indigenous communities and things like that. That was the plan, that there were students among this student body who fit that eligibility, but then they just went whoopsies and tripped, and 150 something other syringes just landed in the arms of all these other 18-year-old boys at private schools.
Do you think that there was a deliberate effort there to vaccinate the kids of the wealthy and powerful and privileged? Do you think that was a deliberate attempt, or do you think it was a proper, just actual fuck up?
I mean, I can't say with any certainty, but I mean,
it never seems.
Either way, that's bad.
It never seems like the underprivileged like accidentally end up with a benefit.
Yeah,
you know
right.
I mean?
So, yeah,
like,
that's like
we didn't
crazy cynicism of it, right?
Accidentally vaccinate everyone in their communal housing towers last year in Victoria. You know what I mean?
We didn't accidentally vaccinate every aged care worker.
Yes, yeah.
We haven't.
We didn't accidentally vaccinate all of the all of the disabled people or all of the healthcare workers who work in those facilities. Those people remain remarkably unvaccinated, but a bunch of strapping schoolboys on the water polo team, they accidentally ended up with the fucking jab in their arms.
What's amazing is that if it was all being done under the eligibility of people from like indigenous communities, like a small subset of that year group being eligible, wouldn't you think after maybe the 40th syringe, you'd be like, all these kids, all these guys, like all of you are eligible under this rule?
And Chad says, yeah, man, I don't know what. My dad's a QC. I think he must have organized it. Like, I don't even know, man.
Because, I think I feel I'm being generous with like, okay, I'll give you 40 shots before you ought to have figured it out.
Yeah.
That maybe you shouldn't be doing this, that you shouldn't get to the full 160.
2,
and then be
3,
like,
hang on a minute.
Oh, hang on a minute.
Hang on a minute.
Hang on a minute.
It definitely looks like all of these guys play lacrosse. I don't know if you guys are necessarily the age group that we're supposed to. You're very strapping young men, I have to say.
Yeah.
But I don't think
they've all been asking, like, when can they get back to playing lacrosse? Like, with the sore arm.
Anyway, I'm just going to go back to trading my Bitcoin. Is this going to take long? And he's like, I don't know if this is the right guy. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dad's day trading, and he says he needs me. So I'll be back in, like, 45 minutes. Can you keep the seat warm for me?
It's fucked.
I don't...
Absolutely wild.
Yeah, I don't know if it was deliberate, but it definitely feels not undeliberate.
There's like, maybe not deliberate, but really shows both some incompetence, but also then just there's some at least subconscious bias going on there that you didn't question it at this point, right?
It did have a whiff of like college admissions scandal, like over in the US, where it's like a whole bunch of like wealthy people's kids just got like shuffled into top tier universities after donations from their parents. It's like, it does seem like the world, like, when you're a rich kid, everything's just like pushing on open doors, isn't it? Like everything just seems, A++ in your life. But privilege doesn't exist, Tom, according to Alan Jones. So,
of course not.
Get your head together, cunt.
No, yeah. Privilege. What's that?
Stupid fucking libtard. So is that all we've got on the vaccine rollout? It's going great. I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah. It's going great. Tune in next week when we'll all have been vaccinated.
Great. And we'll be up to 88% and closing in on the magic number, whatever that might be.
Yeah, it'll be great. Put out the energy you want to see in the world, George.
We need
By
to
next
manifest.
week, we'll all be vaccinated. Like, let's all read The Secret and just get that out there. Think of it like a parking spot and get vaccinated.
Yes, I'm manifesting a 95% vaccination rate. Actually, one last thing on that. I saw opposition leader and Pillsbury Doughboy Anthony Albanese was being interviewed on Insiders this morning. And he just sucks, man. He just
uninspiring.
Just totally uninspiring. They're like, David Spears is like trying to set him up for softball questions, asking him about the vaccine rollout. And he said, like, but, do you think they should have been like very clearly, like, what do you think should have happened instead? And he just can't land one way or the other. Like, he'll go like out of his way enough to like criticize the government, but not go so far out of his way as to actually differentiate his party from anything that the government ever chooses to do at any point.
Yeah.
So it's this weird balancing act of like, the other guys are shit, eh? And he goes, how would you be any different? And he goes, but they're so shit, aren't they? And it's like,
George, you just described the Labour Party.
I just hate it though. It's so transparently like weak and like obviously shit. It's like, if you're going to be an opposition party, you need to oppose stuff. That's how you win from opposition, is you attack the guys in power. Yeah. Like, if you're Pepsi, all you should be doing all day, every day is shitting on Coke and being the opposite of Coke.
A good opposition party shouldn't be like indiscriminately opposing, because like if it's good policy, it's good policy.
Okay, sure, but like
you should at least be opposing when it's bad policy.
Yes.
And there were many times when it was bad policy when they did not oppose, because I guess they also thought it was good policy, and that's bad.
I mean, if you
did any of that make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful.
If you look at what's happening in the States, obviously that's like the GOP, the Republican Party, is a really good example of, how not to just be
opposition.
Yeah, obstinate opposition. But from a political advantage standpoint, it works. Like, they are likely to come in after the next midterms with minority rule because of how they've gerrymandered, like, completely zero-sum, shitty, awful, obstructionist politics will likely win them power at the next election. I know it's not good for governance, but like from a political calculus standpoint, it is good. If the objective is to get power, sometimes you need to be obstinate and sometimes you need to block things. And I just wish that the Australian Labor Party would find a fucking ball sack somewhere in there and reach for it and make the government's life a little bit difficult, rather than just like coming up with saucy witticisms on Sunday morning talk shows. Like,
so you're saying the Labour Party should be more like the Republican Party? You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, honestly, like, if the Labour Party here in Australia had half the balls of the I don't admire anything that the Republicans do in terms of policy, but yeah, they've got balls, and they are willing to die on their fucking hills for the dumb shit that they believe in, which is like corporate tax cuts, for their, GOP donor class overlords. But like,
I was trying to throw you an out, man.
No, I think you're right.
I'm saying like they should be more like the Republicans.
I really think they should. In that they should fight vehemently for what they believe in and have clear messaging and do things in opposition to the party that is in power, not just like have subtle jibes at them. Like, I think that the Liberal Party is very keen to have Anthony Albanese in place for the next election because they know they'll beat him. Like,
oh yeah, he's
weak sauce.
He's the other kind of daggy dad. He's just the daggiest dad that you're like, go away.
Yeah, but too daggy.
I don't know. Yeah, way too daggy.
Too daggy. Okay, so we're done with Australia. We're done with coronavirus. We're going to finish on something light and fluffy. Iceland has run a 4-day working week trial and declares it, the report that discusses this in some length, describes it as an overwhelming success. So the trials were held between 2015 and 2019 and ultimately included more than 2,500 workers, run by Reykjavik City Council. And you might think 2,500 workers, that's not really a statistically significant portion of the population. Until you remember that Iceland's got like 12 people in it. So it's actually like 1% of their whole workforce.
You need to check that math, George. I think 2,500 workers out of 12 is a lot more than 1%.
2,500 workers is 1% of Iceland's working population.
Yes. I was criticizing. I was making fun of the fact you said Iceland only had 12 people in it.
It's not real math that I was doing there. It was a.
No, I know. I was going along.
Yeah.
I was going along with the joke.
Okay.
And just to say that 2,500 was like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Should I get like really up close in the mic? Like, what if I could pin this thing into my mouth?
What if we just did the whole show like this, man?
Yeah, why not?
Oh no, that's awful.
Huh?
Huh? You've swallowed the mic. He's
I'll
ingested
stop
it.
shoving my mic in my mouth.
If ever you wanted to know what Tom deep throating sounded like, then today's
that's just a little snifter.
Today's audio segment brought to you by Pornhub. Pornhub, the place to go for porn.
Yeah, George, don't yuck anyone's yum.
There it is. There's the magic
I told
phrase.
you it was coming.
You son of a bitch. Speaking of coming. This show goes really off the rails without Adam.
This is off the rails when it's also later in the day.
Is that what it is?
And
had a
couple of G&Ts in.
Had a couple of ones,
Yeah. So 4-day work week trial went really well, which is awesome. Which I think is what everyone probably could have predicted, because I thought in a lot of other instances when people have been running trials like this, I think New Zealand had a rather successful one as well. It's sort of shown both overwhelming sort of benefits to both worker mental health and well-being and just overall happiness and morale and also productivity.
Yeah, it's so to be clear, so people will be wondering exactly what the parameters are of this. So employees from a range of professions, including officers, kindergarten, social service providers, and hospitals, move from a traditional 40-hour working week to a 35 or 36-hour working week. But, and this is obviously the critical part, they receive the same pay. So, as you say, obviously, really positive effects for, people's morale and mental health and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, if there's no impact on the amount of in terms of your finances, then obviously that's going to be a positive thing as well. I've got L Pearl 20 writing in, friend of the show, saying 4-day work week. Wow, sign me up. I know, I would be very keen for it as well. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I do remember there being a historical example I think it was from Kellogg's, the cereal company, where I think they came from like a very ardent like Quaker tradition. And they had a situation where they were working a 4-day work week. 4-hour work week.
4-hour work week. Holy cow.
Tim Ferriss. So 4-day work week. And apparently they opted to work additional hours. They had the 4-day work week. They had it all locked in. And they're like, oh, but my mate over the other factory is earning more than me because he's working more hours.
Yeah.
So can we go back to the 5-day working week, please? And I was like, you idiots! You ruined it for all of us!
This is how they get you.
Yes. But I like the addition of like with the same money. And I think if this becomes a societal...
because otherwise,
right.
if they earned less, then we'd all be like, oh, well, okay, so we'll have an extra day off, but we'll be financially worse off.
It's one of those...
why?
Like, sort of... what's the word? It's like a... Not a... like a non-binary... What's the word I'm looking for?
What you're talking about.
So, a situation where it's like, it only works if everyone does it.
It has shades of grey.
50 Shades of Grey, in fact. No, so, speaking of gagging. No, so, it only works if everyone does it, right? The whole point of this situation is it only functions as a whatever it is, 35-hour work week if everyone's got the same 35-hour work week. So, I think the problem, like, up until this point is we've all sort of been held hostage by the fact that, well, I could work 4 days a week and probably get by on 4 days a week worth of money, right? If I had that extra time, that's probably a worthwhile trade-off to get paid 20% less. But like, you got to get everyone else in the world or in the country at least to like also work on that same, like we've all just agreed for whatever reason that 40 hours a week is the standard, is the norm.
Yeah.
And so because we're all doing that, then everyone else is doing that as well. Whereas...
Yeah, and it was the same thing we talked about when penalty rates were either going to be gotten rid of or at least severely reduced, that it kind of turned into a like, oh, hang on, all right, if you're saying that like working on a weekend is now no different to working on a weekday, if you want us to actually buy that because people were working on that idea of we're in a 24/7 economy, et cetera, that, oh, okay, cool, well then a bank should be open then. On weekends, all the other things should be as well. Like everyone has to be on this. It's a 24/7 economy.
Yeah, and we should have staggered 5-day work weeks in all of the workforce. Do you see why that doesn't work?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's good.
It's definitely good to see that these results come out. It's just kind of like, I mean, obviously, I guess we see in like countries like Iceland and all sorts of other places, I guess from our perspective, we see them as like so socially progressive in sort of those sorts of senses, right? I have no idea what even the first port of call would be to implement something like that in Australia on the scale, as you say, that like everyone has to be taking part of it for it to actually work.
The problem is in most Western...
in a way that's fair as well.
In most Western countries, the trend has actually been towards the opposite. Like in the US, Canada, Australia, we're working more. We're working longer hours, if anything. So yeah, I really don't know. I think it is part of this kind of like Western Anglo, sort of ethic where it's like, we're just going to come here and work them fields and work harder than the other boys. Like it's very much this ethic that we have here in the Western sort of English world that they don't seem to have as much elsewhere. Like the Italians are not like this, to be clear. They don't have this like, we need to fucking win at all costs. Like absolutely. My sister, through a family member, got a internship at the government Department of Strikes in Rome. That's right. Italy has a government department that helps with worker strikes.
That helps with worker strikes.
Oh yes, no, not like deals in opposition.
Not a government designed to quash them.
Nope, it is the government department that works with striking workers. Can you imagine? And they would turn up at 10, leave at 3. They would give my sister a piece of work and she would just do it and give it back to them in 20 minutes. And they'd be like, "How did you do this? You're a witch!" There's a different standard in other countries as to but for here, Western countries are so fucking hyper competitive. We've got to do more targets, sales targets going up and up and up and all this sort of stuff. And you wonder, I'm pretty sure we've got it wrong. I don't think we should be like the Italians.
So wrong.
I don't think we should be like the Italians, to be clear. I do think going to the post office and it taking 45 minutes to send a package, not a great experience. But there are ways of doing things that don't rely on continuous, ever escalating commitment to work and work hours.
Oh yeah, I guess. And I feel there's just this huge sort of attitude around, particularly, as you say, particularly in sort of, Western English culture of this productivity and self-worth and the fact that you have to be that you have to earn your right to live happily rather
Yes,
than just
very much
being
so.
allowed to live it. And that's where, as soon as people talk about things like universal basic incomes or like welfare and all these other sorts of things, everyone's like turns up their nose at it because they're all just like, what? But then you could not be working yourself absolutely stupid and still be happy.
Yeah.
That's not what I got to do.
I really,
okay.
I really do think that is part of it. People will be like, well, I had to work the shitty job that I hated, so why do you get an easier...
to not do that?
Yeah, why do you get to not work yourself into rather than just being like, we have generated so much plenty and so much productivity, like increases in productivity, even just year over year in the last year or two alone, with the with the adoption of more digital tools and things like that. Like, there is enough plenty to go around that we could just work less. That's what Joseph Maynard
work less and
Keynes,
achieve the same.
Yeah, like Keynes, the economist back in the early 1900s said that we'd be working like 10, 15-hour work weeks because of how much more productive we got, and there'd be so much plenty that we could just do that and live much more peaceful, lives. And he got the productivity part of it right, but he underestimated the ability of our sort of neoliberal machinery to like make us just keep wanting more. Like, okay, like you don't just like need a house, you need a refrigerator, you need an LCD, you need a flat screen, you need a virtual reality headset, you need there is a never ending like hamster wheel of it's called hedonistic adaptation, where you get used to the good thing that you have and you want more better things, right? You just keep wanting the new next thing. Oh, the iPhone 11 Pro Max was the best fucking thing that you ever set eyes on a year and a half ago, and now it's a piece of shit because the iPhone 12 Pro Max is out there, and it's like, oh, it's got a fucking better camera, slightly better camera. Like, it is stunning to me how much we've like been tricked into, just producing. Not to get all fucking means of production on you, but like, it really does.
And it's by design, by capitalism as a system, right? That's exactly the point.
Which isn't to say that I think capitalism is a bad system. I think there's plenty of good things that have been created by capitalism, like the fact that penicillin is a drug that we can all get and pay for. And like there's a supply chain that supports that, and like people that used to get diseases that would fucking kill them can now just get a shot of penicillin for like a tiny amount of money, and like that.
But I guess probably the fact that it's like that though is thanks to a non-capitalistic ideal of it not being owned by one company and being like super it hasn't been Skrellied. Like,
Martin Shkreli, the guy who famously increased the price of insulin at a drug company. But there's the whole reason that this has a mechanism and a way of getting to us is because someone's making money on it, right? Yeah. And that is inherently a world good. And not just like but also the fact that like I remember reading some report that free market economies and the participation in the labor market has taken, I think it's over 1 billion people in the last 30 years out of extreme poverty because they've got a job and they've got a thing to do and they're living on more than $1 a day or whatever it was that they were before, and their lives are better. We have washing machines now, we have dishwashers, we have heating, we have light that we can generate cheaply. It doesn't cost us 5 hours of labor to generate, to afford light by a candle, which is what it was before. Like now 1 hour of work equals 25,000 light hours or something with an LED. So like things have gotten better, and like capitalism is a part of that. But like, I don't think.
Then there's people like Jeffrey Bezos.
And then there's exactly. And then there's Jeff Bezos who's like sitting like Smaug on top of a pile of money, and like him and what's the other dickhead's name? They're trying to race to space.
Oh, Richard Branson.
Him and Richard Branson are having a rocket measuring contest.
Elon Musk. Sorry, I think like 3 of them now are like, they're all
trying to race to see who can be like
measuring to space.
The first private passenger into space. And it's like, okay, well, obviously that is the negative end of the total extreme of the psychotic, capitalist conservative, crony capitalist nonsense. Like that is the far end of that. But like, I think there have been plenty of good things that have been generated by capitalism also. Incidentally, right? clearly there's no design. Like no one's designing capitalism to do those things. Those good things happen accidentally as a byproduct of people's selfishness. But like, there are good things, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that get generated.
Yeah, I suppose it's I guess. Yeah, I feel like all the positives that kind of come out of it are an amalgamation of, like, I don't know all the terms sort of for it, of whether something's like either communist or socialist or all those sorts of things. But like, yeah, like for example, like polio, as we talked about before, like the polio vaccine wasn't patented.
No.
They didn't follow that capitalistic like that capitalism avenue of, I've invented a thing, I have sole rights to thing, this thing will make me rich. Like they defied that capitalist dream for the good of people, but capitalist supply chains allowed it to be made and go out to a populace, right? So yeah, it's like there's all these mixes of things.
So just looking up Jonas Salk. So in a famous 1955 interview of Jonas Salk, Edward R. Murrow, the famous journalist, asked him who owned the patent. Jonas Salk's reply, well, the people. But that's sometimes used to suggest that Jonas Salk was being dishonest. There was no patent only because he and the foundation couldn't get one. And rather than him just like doing it out of an abundance of like, communistic.
Oh, right. So he tried to get the patent.
Well, I don't know if they tried to, or if they just couldn't afford it, or for whatever technical reason couldn't get it. But like, yeah, it's not because that they didn't want it necessarily, but that they weren't able to get one. Now, granted, Jonas Salk, still the best guy you've never heard of. Like, it definitely saved millions of lives, but would have happened the same as with or without participation in the capitalistic system, I think.
Oh well, yeah, but I guess it's sort of like, I guess we can always look at things as like, oh, well, it couldn't, like it happened because of these systems that we had in place, but it's like, well, I guess, but we can't possibly know what other systems we would have had in place or how things could have happened differently if they happened differently, right?
I think I always argue for like well-regulated capitalism. And I think this like Icelandic study is a really good way of displaying that. It's like, turns out we've generated enough productivity and enough plenty in this world that we can both have our cake and eat it too. Like we can pay people a fair living working wage. They can work 35 hours a week and like spend time with their kids and actually enjoy their lives rather than being, widget makers in the world's worst factory. But like you can do that as well as make the guy who owns the factory still pretty rich. Not like spectacularly like fly to space rich,
the difference.
But like pretty fucking rich.
That's the difference. A games critic commentator that I follow, Stephanie Sterling, they make that great point a lot in their videos where...
Genuine question. Is Stephanie Sterling formerly Jim Sterling? Is that the same person or am I...
Yes,
right,
yes. Stephanie Sterling, I believe, is their preferred sort of first name, is how they often refer to themselves, but they do go by James Stephanie Sterling, sort of the full thing. So Jim Sterling is still the branding and all that sort of stuff, but I believe Stephanie's their preferred name.
Oh, unreal. I didn't know.
Yeah, well, that's their name. But anyway, so they often say, like, because they talk about capitalism a lot around, because it really ties into things to do with video games and all that sort of stuff as well. And often
a lot of money in the video games industry.
Well, that too, and then a lot of the problems that happen in the games industry are often as a result of more systemic capitalism problems. But they often bring up that they're talking about video games more specifically, but they say like video game companies don't want to make some money. They want to make all the money. And that's where the shift would have to be, right? For this 4-day work week to kind of work in, it's kind of like how this would work is that, your workers could work less, but still be generating you the same that you're currently getting. But they're like, but they could be generating more.
Yes.
It's like, no. Like, look, no. You're already a gajillionaire.
So
you're already producing enough.
Yes.
You could just keep doing enough.
Yes. How much
rather
is enough?
than the exponential growth of to be billions and billions more. You could just keep doing the same, and they could be happier.
And I think
I don't understand. I'm not following you.
Technology companies in particular fall prey to this. It's like that line in I think it's a Social Network where he goes, you know what's cooler than $1 million? $1 billion. Like, and that really is the mentality of these companies. It's like, no, we want to be a unicorn. We want to be a $1 company. It's like, but don't you also want people to be happy and enjoy their lives? And rather than doing these, like in video games, famously, they call it like crunch time in video game development studios, where it's like the 6 weeks or the 8 weeks or whatever, 12 weeks leading up to a launch.
Or heck, months.
Like, leading up to a launch. Everyone's working like 80-hour weeks. Like everyone's like sleeping at the office. Like it's just like this hectic time where they're trying to get everything together for a launch of a video game. And it's like famously really psychologically awful. Yeah, and burns a bunch of people out because, you know, they're not spending time with their families and they're, working too hard and, causing issues. Like it's a really bad situation. I guess there needs to be something top down. It's not going to come from itself. It's not going to come from bottom up. Like, well, maybe
some actual trickle down economics.
Maybe it could. Like this is all about what the workers, movement was about, right? Like, investment in unions, people striking. That's how the 40-hour week got invented. It's like, that's what we negotiated down to. Previously, people working in factories 7 days a week, like as much as they physically could in order to provide for themselves. The 40-hour working week was a compromise, right? To come down. So, and oftentimes it feels like to me that it was designed to keep you like just sane enough to keep working. Like the 40-hour was just enough for you to not go insane, but not so much so that you have enough like spare time to like devise your own way of getting out of the sort of hamster wheel that you're in.
Yeah,
like,
to get out of the system.
You don't have enough free time to like start your own business or do something else or whatever. But like you've got enough time to like rest and recover and reset. It's only so much so it's just sustainable to keep going.
Because they don't want to make just some money, George.
They want to make all the money.
All the money.
And don't get me wrong, I work in sales. I like making all the money, but like, you don't need to.
I can see why it's appealing.
You don't need to make all of the money that exists, which is what Jeff Bezos seems to want to do. It's like, not only do I want to make all the money, I want to make all the money that there is. I want to take all of the US the currency that exists in my pocket.
Yeah, and then when I hit that, I want you to make more money.
Yes.
Like, I want you to create more money for me to get.
Anyway.
Like, but Jeff, we can't. No, you'll do it. Inflation be damned.
So this incredibly incisive and obviously very fact-filled discussion of capitalism brought to you by Unnatural Selection. Unnatural Selection. We don't know what the fuck we're talking about. On that note, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow us all over to Iceland, where we'll be getting jobs at the local DMV.
DMV? Really?
I don't know. It's honestly...
I guess...
Iceland sounds lovely, so I don't know what to...
it does sound great. And, probably the only thing putting me off the DMV was the 5th day of work. So you know what I reckon?
First 4 days.
Yeah. 4 would be sick.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.